Once again, welcome to the Coach and the Therapist in Conversation. And we got a treat today. I'm the coach, the relationship and dating coach, and we have...
I'm the therapist, and this is our very special guest, Dr. Kris Marsh. That's right.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah.
Yes, and we got a great show, a great episode. I'm Coach Kev and Kris Violet. We run the Coach and the Therapist on a monthly basis, but today, boy, we wanted to get in a great sociologist, author who's got a great work that she just produced called The Love Jones Cohort, Single and Living Alone in Black Middle Class. So we're going to dive into that. And, as always, you guys can type questions in the chat. It's going to be a conversation of exploration and discovery and some great dialogue. So hopefully you guys enjoy this session. So
Absolutely.
with that, shall we start?
We shall start.
I say we start.
Yeah.
So, I see a lot of friends and family on the chat. I want to thank you guys for participating and always supporting us as always.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. So with that, I'm gonna introduce Dr. Marsh a little bit and have her share her story and how the book came about, because she's got a fascinating story. If you haven't read the book, I highly encourage it. It spoke to my heart. I will let you know, as a single person living alone, a lot of the things she shared in the book from the research, both quantitative and qualitative, gave credence to some of the thoughts I've had, things I've heard, things I've witnessed.
Well, yes. And not only you, Coach Kev, but I can't help it. We just like to have fun. But, the other reason we were talking about doing this was because so many of our clients, Kevs, when they come to him for coaching, when they come to me for therapy, conversations around loneliness, conversations around being single, they get brought up really quite often. And
Right.
it's not kind of that old way that you think it's going to come about, where it's like, oh, I need this, or I'm so lonely that I can't do the things, or I just don't feel fulfilled at all. It really is more like, no, I'm out there, I'm living my life, like I have a career that I'm passionate about. I have great friends. I have a family or a chosen family, that I really love and feel so enriched by. We have these experiences and explore, and yet,
Yes.
this is the one area, right, where I feel like I just don't have any control. I keep trying and it's not working, and so that's what we don't you think, Kev?
I totally
We
agree.
always hear more that narrative, which is one reason why, of many. The book was so validating, I think, for so many people. I can't tell you the amount of people I say, you need to come on this thing. And they were like, oh my God, I just bought this book. People sending me pictures of it. So,
got it, get your copy. Get your copy.
now available and free to be available also on audio.
August 8th. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We all have copies. So Dr. Marsh, why don't you jump in and share your story and tell us a little bit about yourself and the book, how it came to be.
Okay, so I'm actually from Los Angeles. It's great to be in LA talking about my book with you all in LA. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, College Park, but super excited to be here. So one of the things I decided early on in my career, as I chose to be an academic, I decided I was not going to pimp the poor. And what I mean by that is that there are scholars that don't look like me who build their entire body of scholarship on poor Black folks. And I did not want to be that kind of scholar. And it was really important to me. So I always wanted to study the Black middle class, because in spite of, I wanted to study people who had gone on to college, they got big degrees, big houses, big incomes, but their outcomes look different from other racial ethnic groups. So I really need to argue that racism still exists in America, because there's people that want to argue that we had a Black president, so now racism is gone. I'm like, oh, contraire, it's still quite here. So I started my academic career looking at the Black middle class.
Yeah.
And I wanted to look at where the Black middle class live and their segregation patterns. That's how I started.
Yeah.
But I'm a trained sociologist and a demographer, so I look at demographic trends, fertility, mortality, that kind of stuff. And one of the things I was noticing in the literature is that marriage rates were changing for all racial and ethnic groups, but was way more pronounced for Black Americans. And so because of that, and I was like, I think that there's a conversation that we need to have here.
Yeah.
And when we think of it, and this is how we quickly get to the title of the book, The Love Jones Cohort. If we think of like
all of us have it when we're having coffee with each other. Coffee. Go ahead.
So when we think like the quintessential Black middle class family on TV, we think of the quintessential Black middle class family, or Black middle class family, who do we default to?
Cosby.
Come on.
Right, the Cosby's, or the Huxtables on the Cosby Show.
That's right. Yeah.
But Love Jones is where we started to see the demographic shift.
That's
We started to
right.
see characters that
That's
were young,
right.
professional, weren't married, didn't have any children. There are other shows and stories I could have used, but I really wanted to use Love Jones because it's their 26th anniversary this year. And it really does. They started to move the trend away from two-parent households to young Black professionals who weren't married, don't have any children. I could have called this the Insecure Cohort or something like that. And then I also, one of the things that I appreciate about the book, people often say that they learned something. So I want people to understand that a cohort is nothing more than a band of people. It's a classic demographic term.
Yeah.
I want to teach people kind of something.
Yeah.
But I really was understanding that there was a demographic shift in the Black middle class, and I want to talk about it. But to the point that you were making, but I did not want to have this conversation, woe is me, why aren't Black women in particular getting married? I was like, we're not going to have that conversation.
Yes.
And I even say in the book at the end, once you're finished reading this book, I hope you're just as likely to ask somebody, why are you married? As you are to ask somebody, why are you single?
Yes.
We always ask single folks, why are you single? But we don't ask the same question of married folks.
I'm sorry, Sister, when you said that, in that question literally is a sense of like,
It normalizes
judgment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And kind of like a little bit of criticism, like, where's the flaw?
Yeah,
There you go.
ain't no little criticism, it's huge criticism, and it's a deficit model.
Yeah.
It's like you can have all these accolades, but as long as you don't have an MRS degree,
Yeah.
Right.
then none of this really matters, right? And so I wanted to move the conversation forward. I wanted us to not just talk about why aren't people getting married, but I want to talk about the lifestyles that they are leading, lifestyles that they do have. And I wanted to just destigmatize singlehood because oftentimes there's some people that don't want to hold the title of singlehood. So much so that they're willing to get into relationships that are oppressive, toxic, unfulfilling, and even abusive because they don't want to hold the title. So now I've given you a book, I've given you a narrative, I've given you an entire movement so you can stand confidently in your singleness. So that's what the book is trying to do in a nutshell.
And you gave us a title about people who were quite hip. I love Jones.
Let me take
They're fine on their poetry.
Let me see what you do. You write a book and have a really funky title.
Yeah.
People will just buy it just for the title.
Yeah.
And people that don't know will buy it because they don't know what it means. So they have
Right.
Thank you for sharing some of your marketing. Right.
Yes.
Right. You're taking away business though. You're taking away business. But you know what? When you mentioned why are you single? It sounds like people equate marriage to happiness. And it's like, why are you unhappy? Why are you not choosing to be happy? Meaning come to the other side and be married.
Or what about I did it?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I chose to do this traditional thing that maybe if I thought I had other options, if I thought it was okay, maybe I wouldn't have.
Possibly.
So what is it that allowed you to make the decision?
Right.
Right? Whereas I instead possibly conform. We're not saying there's nothing wrong with marriage, by the way. We're not
No doubt.
sitting here going marriage, bash it. We're just talking about the different ways in which this shows itself.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I want to go on record saying that because I do get hate mail
Yeah.
all the time. It says, I'm not good for Black America. I'm not promoting Black marriages. I'm not promoting Black love. And I have to push hard back against that because I argue that I am supporting and promoting Black love. You've got to love yourself first.
No doubt.
And when we think about Black love, it doesn't have to just be this heteronormative mother, father, 2.5 kids and a Black picket fence. Because in the book, I argue that we should be considered a family of one or we should have this notion of this augmented family because friends play a central role in the conversation about singles. And so I think it really is important for us to be more inclusive of how we think about Black love and not just have this heteronormative understanding about Black love. But I get hate mail all the time because they just read the title and think I'm saying, oh, Black women don't need a Black man. That's not what I'm saying here.
Literally not what you said. You just said single and living alone.
I think it speaks to the structure about how it's promoting the whole marital heteronormative, mindset and the culture. I mean, the idea that if you're single, I mean, the whole system is stacked against you. I mean, from the tax structure to everything, it's like, okay, it's hard to be single and happy because you guys are coming at us in so many ways. It
Right.
feels like.
But it's baffling to me how people think like marriage is a panacea. If I can just get married.
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't understand that thinking. I really quite
Right,
don't.
Right.
And so I think it's way more
Well-
important because some people think like, let me just get married.
Yeah,
And I'm like, how about you just focus on being happy in your singleness?
makes
And
sense.
then maybe, and if it happens for you, because I want it to happen for people if they want it to happen.
Right,
But you gotta be that can't be the filler.
right.
No,
Yeah,
no.
no.
Mm-mm. And I think that speaks to kind of what you were getting ready to touch on, which is kind of like the quality of your choices and not kind of sacrificing what it is that you want, what will be enhancing, what will feel mutual, when it's a want versus a need, you can kind of pay more attention to the things that you actually really kind of desire versus kind of checking off that box. Like,
Right.
okay, well, at least this part is fixed. Or even you could have been in a relationship for a really long time and then they're like, well, so I guess we're gonna get married. And it's like, well, why?
Right.
Well, I mean, we've been dating like 3 years. That's the next step. Like, well,
Is it?
why? Like, you didn't say you've been so happy with this person. You didn't say that, you've been able to make it through complicated times or, when conflicts occur, when the relationship is challenged,
Right.
you kind of grow together. You just said, oh, because that's the natural next step.
Right. But that kind of gets back to the point that we were making earlier about how we ask single folks and single folks, we're single. So it's the holidays. We got to get our narrative together. We're going to the holidays. Married folks don't have to do that. They just have to say, oh, I married this person because I love them or something. It's like, no, we need you to be a little bit more thoughtful. I want you to give me more nuanced understanding as to why you got married.
Yeah.
But we have to be clear. All these social institutions push us to be partnered and to be married.
Exactly.
They all do.
Yeah.
And they privilege marriage. They normalize marriage. And anything outside of that is highly problematic. But I, as a sociologist in the book, one of the things I'm arguing is that we also have to understand that there's a structural conversation that we have to have as it relates to single.
I love that you disagree. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so
Y'all will see when you read the book, y'all will see why this is exciting to me. Yes.
So as a sociologist, I wanted to make sure that we didn't leave the conversation at the individual level.
Yeah.
When we leave the conversation at the individual level, some people that are single can say to themselves, woe is me, something's wrong with me. So it's there's a deficit model that's superimposed on them.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, no, we have to also understand that there's a structural conversation that's necessary.
Yeah.
So I argue in the book and in most spaces when I talk about the book, how structural forces constrain our personal choices. So
Say
if I were-
more for people.
yeah, so structural forces constrain our personal choices. Put differently, racism constrains our personal choices.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. If I, Kris Marsh, want to marry another heterosexual Black man with a PhD, my dating pool is constrained. If I want to marry another heterosexual man with a PhD who makes $250,000, my dating pool is constrained. If I want to marry a heterosexual man that makes $250,000, owns his own home and has estate planning, my dating pool is constrained.
Is he in Los Angeles?
I don't need to find out where.
Because I'm like, yeah, you might not own a home. You can check that out of the thing just because, yeah.
And so I think it's really important. So like whether or not people are single by choice or single by force, the larger conversation that is necessary that you have to understand that your dating pool is constrained before you even deciding to be single or not. And I think when we start to argue that conversation, we start to have that conversation, it makes it a little easier to digest our singleness. Because if you don't overlay a structural conversation, people will feel at the very individual level, well, it's being something's wrong with me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think you touched on this too, about how when you look at who people choose to commit to,
Yes.
who people choose to be in relation with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kev, I can't speak to you, but one of the things that you do mention in the book is that Black women continue to be considered the least desired. And so your example just now in terms of structure was like, if I want the person with the PhD, if I want the whatever, but what if that's not even your standard? You don't necessarily need the person to also have a PhD. You know what I mean? Like they could be teaching at community college and be a great photographer, right?
Absolutely.
Like, but is that an option?
Yes, that is absolutely option. But I also think what's really important too people often police Black women and tell Black women what they can and can't not do. Their standards are too high. Their standards are too low. Is this an adult show? Can I use profanity?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay,
you
so they're
can.
angry Black bitches. You know, so they need to lower their standards. Stop policing Black women.
Hallelujah.
Stop policing Black women. Let Black women do what they want to do. If they want to date the bus driver, let them. If they want to date the owner of the bus driver, or the bus company, let them. Stop policing Black women and telling Black women what we can and cannot do. We're policed in most spaces. We're told how we're supposed to talk, how our hair's supposed to look, how loud we're supposed to be, how big our butt is supposed to be.
How our clothes are supposed to look.
Right. How loud we're supposed to be or how loud we're not supposed to be. I miss me on that entire conversation. So I don't care. But if you want someone to match you, because in the book, I talk about how it's educational homogamy. And you typically want to mate, in most cases, people mate with someone of the same education level. I'm not putting a value judgment on it. I've said that. I am not putting a value judgment on it. I'm not saying that's what it has to be, but typically you know somebody in this.
Oh, wait, and let me clarify. I don't think that you were at all. But I was speaking to if you're kind of, for whatever reason, seen as not desirable.
Right.
Then even if you're not looking for that same thing, then there's still going to be challenges to you're not being single. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I wasn't saying that you were saying that, but I want to make sure people on the call, like Dr. Marsh is saying,
that's not what she said, and that's not what I said.
But you know, there's something else that I mentioned in the book too, and it's so funny. I think I was telling somebody the other day. I said, you know, I have a friend of mine, and he's like, I just like light skinned women. I was like, no, you don't. And then I give a big long pregnant pause. And I was like, you've been conditioned from a very young age to think closer to white is right, and more attractive you are to whiteness is right. And I'd appreciate you if you would say, I've been conditioned to like light skinned women, and I date them. But don't just say you just like light skinned women. That's not true. And so I think it's really important for when we think about interracial dating, we need to talk about colorism. But I talk about it a bit in the book, and I talk about interracial dating. And you have some of these high profile Black women that are dating outside of their race, but for the most part, the data is clear. Black women are the least desirable in these dating spaces, in these online dating spaces. And so it's important for us to have that kind of conversation too. It's like, because there's a book by, oh gosh, I can't think of his name. Don't have me start calling out scholars. Richard Banks, he wrote a book called "Is Marriage for White People?" And one of the arguments he makes is that he's like, if we want to change marriage rates for Black Americans, Black women should out-marry more, meaning they should date interracially.
Okay.
Now, I was on BET a little while ago, and they did this little snippet before the show came out. And they're like, well, Dr. Marsh said, if you want to change marriage rates for Black Americans, pay Black Americans reparations. I said what I said. I stand by that. But here's the point.
I like it.
Here's the point though, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to say, like, we have to again, it's a structural conversation. If Black folks had access to capital and resources, you might have more people that are in this area, like the PhDs making 250, having 6 figures and 5 cars and 5 houses and so on and so forth. And so it really is a conversation that needs to be done at the structural level. So, and if marriage rates don't change, at least Black folks got reparations. So
Right.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, either way you look at it. So the book's got some really interesting things. I'm just giving you like just a snippet of part of it, but I do think that you all might look at the book.
We're getting to answer questions. The book is power packed. I mean, there's so much to dive into. So I see a question. No, maybe we should see Omar. I saw this is a great. Let me read it out here. This is a great segue to my question. Can you talk about the differences in how this dynamic plays out for women versus men?
Right. Okay, Omar, that is a really great question. And so in the book, I interviewed 62 people. I actually interviewed 74, but I settled on 62.
Okay.
And I could have easily written this book about Black women because Black women dominate the category. But I decided that I didn't want to write the book about Black women and I wanted to include men in the conversation. And I think that I'm glad that I did. I didn't do this. More. And that's the assumption. Always has to be Black women, but there are Black men in there.
Right.
So there are 2 things that showed up that were really exciting to me from the gendered perspective. And so one is that men were of the mindset that they would eventually get married.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
But see, I interpret that, okay, so that's what we found is that, the women were hopeful that they would get married and the men said that they would get married, which gets back to Dr. Chris's point about, not settling. They weren't willing to settle. The women were like, I'm living my best life. If it happens, but I'm not going to just take anything just to be in a relationship. But the cohort were really clear about that. But the men were like, it's just a matter of time.
Right.
I'm not saying you, but the men it's a matter of time. So if it's just a matter of time, are you just taking whatever
Taking
at this
time.
point? You're taking time, but then are you really, is it just because I'm getting older? I just need somebody. I need somebody helping my medication.
Respectability, singleness. Guys figure they can ask at any point in time. You
Right.
can marry anyone. Whether you stay married or not is the question.
But also, you're dealing with the difference in terms of time, right?
Right.
That you don't have the biological component. And
Of course.
so I think the hope in that sense of like, oh no, I definitely will,
Right.
also comes from, there's not a feeling of the same constraints. There's not a feeling of the same, this needs to happen in the next
Right.
1 or 2 years. But I do think it's fascinating that, a man can say, and just very optimistically, this will happen. Whereas a woman is kind of like, what I call hopeful realism.
Like, right.
It could, I'm not being negative, but I'm also not allowing myself to kind of be stagnant or suspended in the hope of it. Because if it doesn't, then there's been all this time that I should have been kind of actively engaged in my life that I was busy waiting. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's when I'm like, okay, these people are living, they have lifestyles, they're doing things. So I'm like, don't put your life on hold.
Yeah.
If it happens for you, great. But I was like, you got to live in the meantime and between time.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that it's really interesting with the men. The other thing that I found that was a gender difference that showed up is friends. Like I said earlier, friends play a central role. But for the Black women in the cohort, they have that thing on lock where they have these non-romantic nurturing relationships.
Mhm.
The men don't necessarily have these non-romantic nurturing relationships. And part of the reason why the men explain in the book why they don't have it is because they feel like they're going to be thought of as being gay or thought of as being soft. And so they usually have male friends for utility purposes. And I often say to move a couch or to play in a sporting event with them. But I hope the book normalizes Black men having non-romantic nurturing relationships, as well as the Black women already doing that and doing that really well.
I have to ask, did some of the men who you spoke with, did they say kind of like, wow, moving the couch? You know what I mean? No, seriously. Because I often wonder if it's more about just kind of the pretense, right? Like I do need to talk about the thing. And so we're starting off with the couch or with, a pickup game.
And then
But
it
at
turns
some
into
point,
right.
I'd be like, Charles, man, You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think when you get to a place where it's like, Charles, man, I need to just talk. I'm not coming to move your couch. I need to just talk. And then be open about that.
That's just very evolved.
We're gonna get there. I think we're gonna get there. I think we absolutely can get there at some point in time. So there are some nuances along gender lines, and I'm so glad that I did decide to include the men in the conversation.
Me too.
Yeah.
It really made it, I felt like much more rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to the point that I was making earlier, though, I think also, and I don't necessarily touch on it in the book, but when talking about men are just going to take somebody, I think men have the ability to marry up, marry down, or marry whatever they want to do. Black women, again, you police us and tell us what we can and cannot do. Black men have carte blanche. They can do whatever they want to do. That's highly problematic. Either everybody's got carte blanche or nobody does. But stop asking Black women to change this and not checking Black men when they decide they're going to do something different or something that's out of the norm. We check it everybody, we check it nobody is the way I look at it.
Well, I think they're also more
My story, I was like,
sorry, you guys, she's cracking me up over here. But I also think that when we look at kind of, and this is shifting, but right, like the same way that, Black women are the least desired, right? Black men suffer a lot of things, but especially here, they are the most desired.
right.
So, it's not like, it's interesting. It's kind of like, yeah, I see you, sis, but also she sees me, she sees me, she sees me.
Right.
Asian, Middle Eastern,
Right.
Latin, and even if it's not an issue of kind of wanting to stay, or even if it's not so much an internalized racism thing just to kind of like, ooh, Baskin Robbins 31 flavor. You know what I mean? Like it's just so it's interesting to your point about kind of the policing of the way in which you choose to move versus a sense that you can move very freely in this specific space.
But I do think like at the crux of this entire conversation is like the sexuality of Black people.
Right.
And not Black women. Now, you know, but Black people, period.
Yeah.
Right. Like in the online dating space, you know, they talk about like, you know, Black people are either highly visible or highly invisible. If they're highly visible, they're highly visible for
a
sexual
reason. For a reason.
Right.
Yeah,
For sexual reasons. I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think this also leads to a really important conversation in the book. And I think I put it in a footnote that I'm talking about people that are single and living alone. And I talked to 62 people and only 2 people mentioned sex. That was,
tell y'all.
I was
She
wondering.
said that on our call and I was like, oh, okay, hold on a
What's
second.
going on?
Yeah, hold on a minute.
Basically, single people don't have sex.
well, no, I don't.
Based on the book, there was no really.
But see, it wasn't a central part of their lifestyle, right? And so, so I grappled with whether or not I wanted to say anything. I was like, okay, I'll talk to 62 people. They didn't talk about sex. Should I say something?
Okay, is it not a central part of their lifestyle because they've had to adjust to not engaging in that way? And so it kind of didn't come up. In other words, like, okay, so if not having sexual interaction or physical intimacy with a romantic partner becomes the norm, was it just less discussed? Do you know what I mean? Because I mean, that is one of the key differences between the companionship piece, right?
Right.
Of having your friends and this sense of community and connection and all that other stuff. It's still like, I can't lean over and kiss you. So at some point, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, bye.
Like 60% said they were dating. I remember that. So a lot of people are dating in the cohort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Point.
So I do want to clarify that. So just because you're single and living alone, that means you're not living with a romantic partner. You can be in some type of romantic relationship. You're just not living with a partner.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why that was important is because I really wanted to know, getting back to their lifestyle, like how they decide when they're going to buy homes, if they're going to buy homes, where they're going to decide to live in these homes. And more importantly, if something were to happen to them, how are they going to disseminate their assets? I have a whole chapter on wealth and wealth dissemination. I think it's really important for people that are single and living alone. Everybody, Black Americans, period, should have a living trust or a will. 30%, I think, of Black Americans don't have a living trust or will. Less than a quarter of my cohort actually have a living trust or a will. So one of the things I really want people to think about is like, if you're single and you're living alone, if I want it to happen for you, but until it happens for you, it really is important that you need to know where your stuff's going to go. So everybody should have themselves a trust. Or
you were like, I will clarify again. I am a hater of the relationship.
However, we're like,
Presenting the facts.
Yeah. So, but back to the conversation about sex though. But one of the things I think is really important. So I put it in there. I think I put it in a footnote, but I was doing a talk one day about the book. And there was a woman saying, you know, I just want to have I want to get a piece every now and again. So how do you kind of deal with that? And I think we have to be really careful too, because if we're not careful, what we'll do is we'll equate being promiscuous with being single. And the two don't necessarily have to go hand in hand.
No.
I ain't indicting married folks. There's some married folks having a whole bunch of sex and not with their partners out here. So, you know, okay, so then it got quiet. Okay.
Not for me. I mean, you just never used.
But unfortunately, what happens is we think the first thing we default to is, oh, they have to get having sex.
Yeah.
I wrote a 250-page book and it came up twice.
That's fascinating. Yeah. You also mentioned kind of mental health in terms of situational loneliness.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting. There's a part in the book, you guys, where she talks about one person who you interviewed was saying that 70% of the time, you know, they felt comfortable and happy and fulfilled and doing their thing and living their life, but that the other 30%, there was a sense of, you know, not profound sadness, but a lacking, you know, a sadness, a loneliness, a feeling of you maybe in an area that felt a little empty, and also the worry about who is there to take care of me. Safety if something happens. When you talk about neighborhoods, people choosing to live in certain areas where they knew that somebody could get to them quickly because they lived alone, or you get sick, or that one cat who had the back surgery or something, right? Literally no one's here to help me. And so I think again, you always go back to not any kind of companionship, but quality companionship. But in the meantime, that part I found fascinating, the idea of situationalness and then how that plays it. Do y'all hear the soundtrack we just started? Because Shaka Khan is over here.
I think that's upstairs.
Okay.
Like, right.
And it's I'm Every Woman. So it's almost like it could be
Perfect. So like, right. So there's,
I don't know if I close this.
so there's two things I want to comment on. So I was doing a talk one time. One woman said, well, I just don't want to die alone. I don't want to be in my house for 3 days and nobody knows that I'm here. And I was like, similar to how we like promote this kind of idea about marriage being a husband, wife, 2.5 kids and a black picket fence. These social institutions have also instilled fear in us. And they're like, oh, I got to be partnered. I got to be with somebody so that I'm not dead in my house for 5 days. And I was like, just because you're married doesn't mean that you won't be alone.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean your spouse is going to show up for you.
Yeah.
Your friends are going to show up for you.
Because if they're stepping out, they don't even know that you're there.
Someone was telling me that there's a recent study that was coming out saying that spouses are leaving relationships when they found that their other spouse is actually sick. Because they don't know how to deal with it. So that it's easier for them to just walk away. And I'm like, wow. So I think, again, I think it gets back to this whole notion about marriage being the panacea. I think that this is where friends play a central role again. And there are people that talked about situational loneliness. And I wanted to be balanced. Yes, people had very positive lives. They were living their wonderful lives. They wanted it to happen, but they were living it.
Yes.
But there were some people that had situational loneliness. But see, people, because they think that they still stigmatize singles, like, oh, all you single people are pulling the covers above your head in the fetal position, just depressed and lonely and so on and so forth. I'm like, miss me. I'm in a whole entire conversation. I was like,
very hot.
am I right?
You're trying to sleep and then.
I was like, I kind of in some ways wish that married folks would be really honest too. Like, how happy are you?
Agreed.
Okay, but that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. But here's the point though. They were for the most part, 70%, they were happy, but they were like situational loneliness. It wasn't like this chronic loneliness where they couldn't get out of bed.
Right.
It was more like situational, like around Valentine's Day, when they think they didn't have anybody to kiss, or New Year's Eve, or they'd have flowers on Valentine's Day, or New Year's Eve when you don't have anybody to kiss. But then they also talked about friends, how friends really help them through that. So I think it's really important for us to be more inclusive of the way in which we think about love. Give your friends flowers for Valentine's Day. Give your friends chocolate for Valentine's Day. Why do we always privilege the romantic love?
Listen, because my friends know I'm on a budget now. I love you, but we don't need to spend this extra money on chocolate and pie.
Right. That's enjoyable.
Right.
Right.
Or they may get the wrong message. I mean, so we got.
Y'all, why is the culture of therapist in conversation? At some point, this one is gonna say something absurd.
But here's something else you mentioned. So I heard the retreat of marriage and the rise of singlehood. Because we do see this shift happening with marriage folks. I mean, I see the marriage thing polyamory is blowing up in the marital ranks. I mean, it's changed as well.
Yes.
And so with more single people, I think there's less people getting married, it feels like.
Yeah.
So how does that play into all of this dynamics? So shouldn't the culture be adjusting, I would think, given the rise in singlehood?
It absolutely should. We're just not quite there yet. We still privilege marriage. We still think marriage is the way to go. But I think when we have these kind of conversations, when we have this kind of book, it's starting to say there's another, and again, marriage is great. There's another narrative. There's another alternative. I have younger students, college students, like Dr. Marsh, thank you for this, because we didn't have this narrative. It was always like, you got to go to college, you get married, you have children, blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, you can live very thriving lives as a single person. So we're moving in that direction, but we're not quite there yet. But now, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that singlehood's on the rise globally, but it's more pronounced for Black Americans. But the scholarship has a white gaze because you have a lot of single white women that are doing it now. So the scholarship is kind of, single white women are choosing to be single. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna have right. And so I was like, Black women, whether or not we were doing it by choice or by force, getting back to this argument about structural forces, we've been doing this thing for quite a while. Yeah. So we have to talk about singlehood and make sure that we give respect and give flowers to Black women because they've shown us how to do it. We are showing other people how to do it. We're the trailblazers, we're the pioneers. And so that's one of the things I also push back against scholarship that focuses on singlehood because it has a white gaze and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things I think is really interesting in the book, getting back to my argument about structural forces constrain personal choices.
Yeah.
If you buy my argument that structural forces constrain personal choices,
Mhm.
I am then saying that people who are single should be considered a family of one.
I heard you say that.
I like it.
Okay, well, so go with me for a second. Go with me, because to not do that, you're discriminating against me in plain sight.
No
So
doubt.
so follow me. So if we're saying that racism constrains our personal choices, and then because Kris Marsh, I'm not married, I don't have any children. If we use the Census Bureau as a gold standard for data, I don't
Okay.
show up as a family in the
Nope.
Census Bureau data. I show up as a household, not as a family.
Mhm.
There are advantages to being in a household. I'll give you three. And with Coach Kevin already gave us some. So if I want to go to Verizon and get a cell phone family plan for my one cell phone, I'm going to pay the same amount as I'm going to pay more for my one cell phone. If I want to go on vacation, double occupancy is less expensive than single occupancy. And then one that everybody probably knows is that there's a singlehood penalty built into the tax structure.
No doubt.
And so there's a really great author named Dorothy Brown who wrote a book called The Whiteness of Wealth. And one of the things that she argues is that we should all file as single. And if we can't all, because some marriages have advantages in the tax market. Either we could all file as single
Right.
or we all file as a family. But the fact that I can't be defined as a family and structural forces have constrained my personal choices, and that could be reasons why I'm single, is highly problematic for me.
Yeah.
And then to continue that, if you don't want it, if you're like, oh, family's got, because in the Census Bureau, they say family must be related by blood, marriage, or adoption. So since no one of my family's related, I can't be a family, right?
Right.
So if you want to hold to that family definition, because you have some philosophical reason as to why you want to, that's fine. I also think we should be able to develop augmented families, which gets back to my argument about
Okay.
friends.
Right.
People who are in non-romantic nurturing relationship should be able to develop a family and get the benefits of a family, especially when we're thinking about later life and thinking about being able to help out with healthcare and later life decisions. I think it's really important for us to be more inclusive in the way in which you think about family and stop thinking that it solely has to be a mother, a father, 2.5 kids, and a black picket fence.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
want the Black Lives Matter and the single discount. Right?
I will give it to me all the discounts.
All the discounts.
Yeah, I'm with
I
you.
like it,
I'm with
Dr.
you.
Marsh.
I'm with
I
you.
saw that in the book and I was like, boy, she's on to something. I've always wondered that, especially with the tax structure.
Yes, yes, yes.
Not fair at all.
Yes. Now, if you do, when you pick up the book and buy the book, it is the.
I like the power of your
Yes.
language there.
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying?
I
Yeah.
did there. Yeah. When you buy the book, understand that it's an academic book. And it's published by Cambridge University Press, which is the top academic press in the world. So the introduction and chapter 1 are a bit theoretical because it is an academic book. So if you don't like theory and stuff, just hold on until you get to chapter 2. Chapter 2 through chapter 10 is a very different read, but you just got to get through the introduction and chapter 1.
Mhm.
Yes. And be sure to read the footnotes because all the really juicy things are in the footnotes. So make sure you read the footnotes, please.
That's where the two people talked about the sex.
In the footnotes. Yes. Yes.
What? No, I mean,
I think this one in the footnotes.
your charts, your facts, your figures, I think were impressive, as well as the references to other articles, other research.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lots of good stuff packed in there, and I'm sure you teach a course on this, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see the textbook nature and how it would play out. So that's a good stuff. So thank you for that.
I think anytime you hear other people's stories, right?
Yeah.
It's extremely affirming, right?
Right.
It's extremely validating because so much of the time a person kind of feels like, here I'm sitting here. And when you think about how the message is internalized,
Right.
and how we then can kind of see ourselves or that narrative and then kind of, warding against
Yes.
almost the natural inclination to then go, what's wrong with me, right?
Right.
Then you're like, wait a minute, a cohort? That's what I'm talking about. Not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like, yo.
It really helps to kind of normalize.
Absolutely.
I think about people I've seen in the past before this came out, and now I could say what I was saying and also be like, and also, if you feel like what I'm saying is not, you too can read this book.
Right.
Yeah. And anybody can read the book. If you're married, you can read the book because one of the cool things about the title of singles that we've all held it at one point in time.
Yeah.
Some of us longer than others, but we all held the title. So I think it's really important. It can strengthen your marriage if you read the book, because you think about yourself individually, and it can help strengthen the marriage. Even if you're not Black, you can read the book. Everybody can glean something from the book. I decided to insert myself at the Black middle class on-ramp to the conversation, but anybody can glean something from the book.
Yeah.
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 That makes
What you
sense.
spoke about with intergenerational wealth, and kind of how you're pulled on or not pulled on
Yes.
based on your role in the family,
Yes.
right? And how that can dictate go.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
thing and you don't get
I
book,
want to make sure that this starts out. So like, again, to the point that everybody can read the book. So if you think that you're a smug married and this isn't for you, then I'm fine with that. But also think about read the book so you can know how to navigate your single friends. One of the things that comes up over and over again is that because we're single and we aren't married, don't have any children, our checkbook and our time, it becomes the extended family time. Everybody's pulling on us because they're like, oh, well, Kris doesn't have a partner, so I don't have to worry about wasting her time, taking her time. Or Kris doesn't have any children, so I don't have to worry about their children not eating, but you can take it from me. And so I think we need to think about our single friends differently. So the book can help you think about our single friends differently, how to navigate our single family members and friends and so on and so forth differently.
shift the perception.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it also speaks to the situational loneliness. You mentioned family at times can cause that situational loneliness, and how, you go to the family functions, everything is kind of catered to the family dynamic, and you're there and you feel, they make you feel out of place at times because you're the single person at the family reunions.
Right. And you almost have to have like a pep talk with yourself before you go to the family function.
You got to have your rationale.
Yeah, so I think families should be reading this book. They're like, okay, we don't want to ostracise our other family members that are single. We want to make sure this is a space that embraces everybody.
Educational, no doubt, no doubt.
One of the other things I talk about in the book, which I think is really important, and getting back to the idea about friends, which I think is interesting, right? Because when you're married and things get a little crunchy, you can go to a marriage and family therapist and work through that. But I also think we want to really value friends, want to normalize friendships, non-romantic nurturing relationships. And we don't have a lot of resources for people that are in friendships that want to go and get counseling, therapy. And a therapist had emailed me and called me like, Dr. Marsh, thank you so much, because we want to normalize friend therapy. I have a friend that we stopped talking for many years. And I think it's partly because she's a dog person and I wasn't a dog person, and her dog died. And I don't think I responded the way I was supposed to. So we haven't talked in 3 years. I would love to go to a therapist and work this out, but we go for marriages, but we don't go for friends. And your friends are in some cases, they're going to be there for you. They're going to show up for you. So I think it's really important for us to normalize having friend therapy as well as marriage and family therapy. But also, if we think about it, aren't we always supposed to be friends before we get married anyway? So shouldn't we have been in therapy before?
When you think of the idea of kind of like the healthiest sort of relationship, right? What the foundation,
Right.
The foundation that you establish with the person, absolutely should be one of friendship. No, there is no friend therapy.
There's
people
some,
talking about.
we just don't talk about it enough. We don't normalize it.
Relationship coaching that covers relationships and all that aspects. So friendship.
But you're definitely in the minority at this
I'm in the
point.
minority.
Right.
And I was gonna say, for me,
Yes.
they come to talk about very troubling friendships or friendships that have been amazing, and then there's a disruption, right?
Right.
And then it's more about kind of exploring healthy boundaries, exploring possible ways to approach a conversation around that. But you're right, it's not like, okay, now the two of y'all friends come and sit down. That's right. That's a different.
Right.
And some of the challenges in the friendship space are about singlehood and how their friends perceive them to be single, and they're trying to set them up. It's not working out. What's wrong with you? It's your question.
Right.
I set you up with some great guys or girls. Why is it not working out? And they're having to navigate that and see coaching. How do I manage my friends' expectations because they want me to be like them? Either married and happy or married and unhappy.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever that means,
But
right?
they're actually dealing with those relationship dynamics and having challenges.
Well,
How to
that's
manage.
Right.
Yes, I've had a few clients that spoke to that dynamic. But it's about singlehood as well.
And then that narrative, you must not be that lonely, or you must not really whatever. I put you up with James.
Right. But that kind of gets to the point of like, I think it's a really simple question, but I think it can be very complicated for us to think through and actually try to answer. It's like, why do you want to be married?
Mhm.
Or why do you want to be partnered? Getting back to the colorism conversation, is it because that you've been told from the age of 3, 6, 12, you're gonna have the white wedding, you're gonna have like this? I think it's really important to ask people, why do you want to be married or why do you want to be partnered? And have them really sit with that for a second to find out, because you have a lot of non-romantic nurturing relationships that are fulfilling relationships, but there's something else you think you need, or you're told that you're supposed to need. How does that, it's important to find out whether these are your individual needs and wants, or if this is what's been superimposed on you, you condition and think this is what you want and need.
Well, I don't know, 'cause I'm struggling because I'm like, well, no, because this is not then about so much marriage, but about the idea that different types of companionship kind of fill different spaces or different roles. And so, and I hesitated because that's not necessarily why do you want to be married. But I guess if the question were why would you want to be partnered or have a companion that was constant, you know what I mean? Then would you find that they hold slightly different spaces? Like the nurturing relationships with friends, enriching, et cetera, but almost kind of holds one space, right?
Right.
And then the romantic companionship holds another space. And then if you choose to be a mother or father, that kind of holds another space. You know what I mean? Like I wonder about that piece, that they're just that the types of companionship, even while at the root should be kind of a friendship, right?
Right.
Are different.
But so and I don't disagree with you. I guess the question is like, okay, so do some of these other spaces, do these other relationships hold enough space? Or are you told that you still have, even though you've got all these great relationships, you still have to have this? But all these relationships give you exactly what you need in one way or another.
Yeah.
But you're still told it has to be done this way.
Condition, yeah.
You're conditioned.
What do you think relationship coach?
Yeah, the pressure, I think, I think there's a combination. I think there's a combination of, there's the pressure, the societal, the cultural, but also there's some personal desire, whether that's conditioned as part of the pressure. Wanting to connect as a human, having that partner, and then you hear people say, I don't want to die alone. And I'm like, well, unless you die at the same time,
Right.
you're probably gonna die alone. Right? But I think there's a lot of pressure that we talked about, the structural pressure, and then the challenges that exist because of all the things you've mentioned, from the book.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, and that's why there is coaching and therapy, because we have to process what it feels like and what we can do, and what do they want to do? What do they really want?
Right.
As it pertains to being married or being single.
Right.
What would make them happy? What's fulfilling?
Right.
And it may be the friend network and figuring that out, because I think, you talk about it in the book. I think the older singles were starting to say, you know what, I don't care anymore. And I'm doing me.
Right.
This is how it's going to be. And,
Right.
and I've seen that happen even for myself. Right. At some point, I was kind of worried about how I was perceived, especially in my family and friend circles. Right?
Oh, yes.
Many of them were having, kids early on, and now their kids are finishing college.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, okay.
Right.
I got to give up that one.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Not that it's a competition, but you do evaluate to your, you do compare to peers and see where you stack up as far as what does it mean?
Well, there are those quote unquote self-imposed milestones.
Right.
And the pressure around those milestones.
And now I'm just like gonna be the best uncle I can be.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like Disneyland is next week.
Right. The godmother I can be, like, absolutely. Like, yeah.
It's interesting what you talked about in terms of older people, not just kind of looking at the whole thing differently, but even what they were searching for, if they were still searching for companionship.
Right.
I remember the one that was kind of like, I don't care what career they have because we're both retired. So
It doesn't matter.
this conversation.
Right. Yeah.
That shift based on age. Yeah.
What you thought and believed at 20, or, the ideas change at 30, at 40 and 50. I know we may have some questions. Omar, did you have a question again? Nope. Any other questions? Feel free. You can come off of the mute and, and ask questions, because we're having a good old time here. You would think we have alcohol, but we don't.
Right. It's just water.
It's just water. It's not vodka.
They just have water. Not joking.
Someone is holding out. Someone is holding out.
Well, as you're thinking about your question, one other thing that I think comes up, I want some more stuff about the book. So as you're aging,
Right.
so I drew from one of my colleagues. He wrote a book called Happy Singlehood. One of the central arguments he makes in his book is that people that are long-term singles, long-term never married, they actually tend to be happier as they age. Part of the reason why they tend to be happier is because marriage people put all their eggs in the marriage basket, and they put all their eggs in the marriage basket and don't have like a network. So their partner becomes their everything. Single folks who, especially long-term, never married adults, as they age, they have different friends for different things. Some they go to church with, some they golf with, some they go to food events with, sometimes people they go traveling with. And so they live a fuller life, and it's more fulfilling. Married people find themselves returning back to singlehood because of widowed, separation, or divorce, and they put all their eggs in the marriage basket, and they don't find themselves as fulfilled.
Oh, now, sitting here as a therapist, I'm like, let's see, why are all their eggs just in the basket?
But people sometimes do that. They put all their eggs. Your partner has to be your everything.
But see, I think that's a faulty or this is what I've seen. Concept of kind of marriage. Whereas realistically, that family that you've created, right? And all those other people should still exist.
Yeah.
You should have the ability for all of it.
Yes.
So when I read that, it made me think to the studies I used to hear about. Married people live longer and have happier lives. So what are we saying? Things have changed, right? Or that study was biased.
No. Sometimes married folks can live longer.
Right.
And sometimes people that are never married and never having children, they can actually be very happy as they age as well. So they both can be true.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's quality of the relationship dependent.
Yeah.
Quality of the friendship.
Yeah.
Quality of the relationship. Yep.
Yeah. And do they have outside friends that help them through their marriage, or is it just this partner that they're in? And so in a lot of the studies, like the men typically tend to live a little longer because the women are there as the administrators and that help them. The conversation.
With the help. Makes sense. All right. Got a question here. And we older singles focus on ourselves and have the time to heal.
Amen, church.
Thank you, Diane. Let's see. Any other questions, comments?
Omar, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yes. Yeah, about gender.
Okay.
This is actually interesting because I'd imagine if I were on the other side of this, I would really just be kind of absorbing everything that you were sharing and really kind of just reflecting on it, because it's interesting and it's a different perspective than what we're used to.
Yes.
Hearing, like even radio shows, right? And what did he do? And read the letter and such, and couples married, whatever. And so I initially thought, I was like, ooh, I could think of all kinds of people that are going to be asking all kinds of questions about this thing, but it's just as interesting.
Yes.
It's equally as interesting, the lack of, because I think you really are just like, whoa.
Right.
Okay, whoa.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not the easiest conversation to have, because I think being partnered and being married is like a social, cultural juggernaut.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're not promoting that, clearly something's wrong with you. You hate life. You're a man bachelor. You hate men. You just man.
Well, I mean, it's like you hate Black people.
Right.
And the family. So I mean,
right.
But it's like I think it at least gives you some stuff to think about. You do not have to agree with me.
Yeah.
But at a minimum, you have to stop and pause and be like, this fast talking professor might be on to something.
Right.
Like, yeah. So it's a good conversation.
So I have a question. Have the folks that love Jones the
I actually have something.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to raise my hand, but I figured I'd just cut in here really quick. I wanted to say it's also very, it feels good to hear the things that you're actually thinking, but not talking to anybody about. So just being okay being single at the age that we're at, like, and not having kids or never being married, or, it's actually nice to hear it and not be on another like podcast where you're listening to them talking about like, why can't I get a man, or why am I not married? It's nice to hear the things that we're actually thinking, but we're not expressing to anybody else. So thank you for that.
Yes. And so the two biggest compliments that I've gotten from the book is that people have said they've learned something,
Yeah.
whether or not you're a sociologist, a demographer, you learned something.
Yes.
Right.
And people have said, thank you for letting me be seen. For
That's
the
it.
first time, and you said that this morning. I'm like, yeah, people said, thank you for letting me be seen, Dr. Marsh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because you have all these shows, the reality shows, like you just don't have this conversation. This is not as, in some spaces, people may not think this is as sexy, but it's very thought provoking.
It is. And you know what? That word, I'm so sorry, because I'm always like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. She's gonna end up bruised by the time this is over. But that word seen, that was the other thing that was kind of coming up really consistently, and how you can move throughout your day and feel. I've had several people tell me it's like I'm invisible.
Mhm.
It's like I just don't feel seen. And so there's something around kind of almost before partnership, right?
Right.
Before moving into any aspect of marriage, but just that desire to, and again, they were like, I'm okay, but I'm very aware that I feel a bit invisible. And
Yeah.
so, the idea that this says, okay, I see you, becomes that much more powerful.
Yes.
Because all the coping and the friendships and all that in the world, and making sure you have the right kind of, not right, but that your perception is broad enough, and you validate yourself and affirm yourself and your experiences. There's still a piece of that when you allow yourself to feel all the things,
Mhm.
right, does feel that.
Right.
And has to kind of process that. You have to process that, right? To then be able to kind of move through that. But I can't tell you the amount of people who have shared that. And so the idea that like, wow, thank you, I feel seen is
It's a compliment.
is really,
it's high praise.
it's quite
Yeah.
profound
Yeah.
for people who just then have such a difficult time saying, no, I actually feel pretty invisible, and yet I'm still okay.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and also I'm not the only one.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I was going to ask you, we have someone joining in,
Oh.
whether or not you had been reached out. I mean, the Love Jones, the movie, the folks at the movie, have they reached out? Or-
They have not reached out to me yet, but maybe, fingers crossed, they will reach out to me. I was
Yeah.
like,
We need to have a second movie, and you could be like a contributor, or, special,
yeah.
yeah.
I was hoping the book would come out on the 25th anniversary, which was last year.
Yeah.
But it came out this year, but I was like, I'm okay with it. It's still out, and it's a good conversation. So
I mean, since we're all friends, I'm just gonna add that, like if Nia Long's character felt like she needed to talk to a therapist, I'll play that role. It's I'm not trying to,
Yeah. See, my friend Reese said it's explaining it without discomfort.
yes,
Wow.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
That's
Thank you,
big.
Reese.
I go out with my book now and walk around with the book in my back pocket.
I'd be like, like bam, like
Hey.
Damn. At the coffee shop, like that's right.
like what is that you're reading? Be like, yes. And so just to tell you about the cover of the book. I know it's 6:30. So again, I also say in the book that it's a politics of citation. I wanted to cite Black scholars that were talking about Black
I
families.
love that you did that.
I was like, there's white scholars that have made their careers, but this was really important to me. But I also when I first wanted to do the cover, I wanted to have like individual people sitting like at a coffee shop, shopping, doing yoga, trying to show their singleness. But all of the illustrators that I found weren't Black either. And so I said, I can't in good conscience put them on the cover of the book. So I found a quilt. This is actually a quilt. There's a woman who would quilt in Anacostia, part of DC. And she would bring young Black kids to her house and teach them how to quilt. So the picture is actually a quilt. People think it's a stained glass window in a church, but it's a quilt. I think it gets to the point about families and friends, how they play a central role in singlehood. So that's how he came up with the cover of the book.
Yeah. Yep. That's
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
Question, where can you buy the book?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Okay, so if you'd like to buy the book for a mere $29.99, you can buy it on Amazon. You can go to my website. My website is Dr. Kris Marsh. That's DrKrisMarsh.com. And you can buy it from Cambridge, you can buy it from Amazon, and the audiobook will be coming out 5 days after my 50th birthday.
Wait, I would also like to add, you can order it from Itavia's Bookshelf, which is a lovely
Yes.
new bookstore, a boutique
Pasadena.
bookstore in Pasadena. owned by a Black woman. It's wonderful, and you can always order it from there as well.
And I think it's at Malik's in the Fox Hills Mall. I
There
call
you
it the
go.
Fox Hills Mall.
Yes, because it will always be.
Do the Fox Hills
The
Mall.
Fox
They're
Hills
like,
Mall.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But please do pick it up. Let me know what you think about it. And I think you'll get something out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're so honored that you graced us with your presence and your knowledge. And the whole thing came about because I actually saw someone post a cover of your book on social media.
Really?
Somebody in my friend group posted the book and said, boy, this would be a great topic for the rest of the year. And I was like, wow, we need to have this on the Coach and the Therapist.
Yeah.
Shared it with the team.
Yeah.
And Kris was like, yes, we do.
I was like, I'm
Wait,
excited.
no. And as soon as he did, I sent it to some friends like, oh, wait a minute. Have y'all heard of this? And they were like,
Right.
somebody just gave it to me. Somebody else was like, instead of me the pictures of what they had.
So it's making the rounds.
Yeah.
The
And
conversation.
somebody else was like, we can't have this at book club. Everybody would come with their own boxes of wine.
I'm like,
Right.
the truth, maybe, but it's good. And I like what
They'll
Reese
do it
said, you know,
anyway.
it's like, it's explaining without discomfort. So you need a
No
space where you
doubt.
can just have these kind of conversations. And it's not a
Absolutely.
deficit model. It's like, why aren't you getting married? That's
Yeah.
not the only conversation.
Right. It is
Yeah.
power packed. I mean, we're
Yes.
just scratching the surface. I mean, superficially given there's a lot of stuff to digest in this book. I love it. I want to also thank Diane because she reached out to you
Yes,
and found out you were here in Los Angeles so we could do this in person,
yes.
which is phenomenal. So
Yes.
thank you again,
Diane. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
She emailed me and I called her and she's like, oh, it's just so good to have a phone call every
Right.
now and again. This worked out great for us.
I really have to add too, in this kind of day and age of social media and the benefits of that, which is kind of like you said, that's how you heard about the book. But also sometimes being like, how many followers will that have enough of an impact on the thing? I don't know if I could, and just your immediate willingness, you had not heard of the Coach and the Therapist, you know what I mean? And your immediate willingness to not only hop on the phone, but she is the one who was like, what, Zoom? No. We must have this conversation in person. Yeah, so.
I just suggested it and y'all went with it.
Of course we did, but truly it's just lovely to just so easily be able to just kind of come and connect and have conversations like these. And it's you didn't have to.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's really, it's quite appreciated.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And I really am happy to be here. Not everybody's going to agree with what I say. And you're not supposed to. You're really supposed to spark a conversation. If our work is done here, you'll go back and continue the conversation.
Yeah.
That means that we do what we're supposed to do here.
That's right.
I think we did what we're supposed to do. So I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need the link too. I think somebody they're putting the link in
Diane
the
is
chat.
sending the link. Yes,
Okay.
please. Let's see. Oh, you'll send the link. Can you post it in the chat, Diane? That'd be great as well.
Yeah.
We also want to acknowledge Blackbird, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This space, I don't know how much of it you guys can see. You see a little bit of the back and the openness, but Blackbird Collective, Blackbird House also called, is a wonderful space where people come and fellowship and network and discuss ideas and have talks. And they've been amazing and so welcome. And so thanks to Blackbird as well. Absolutely. We will be back.
Yes.
Great. Any closing remarks, Kris?
Oh, Kris was here. Kris was the
Dr. Marsh.
Dr. Marsh, Fulbright scholar, I might add,
Yes.
Fulbright scholar.
So just so that you know that I have been in South Africa and I've had 9 book talks in South Africa. So it's going international as well. I'm talking to somebody from Ontario next week. I'm going to the UK to have the conversation. In fact, similar story. There's somebody from the UK that said, would you do something for me? So I did it. And I was the most watched video that they have on their platform.
That's why.
Yeah. I want to get the conversation out.
Yeah.
There's no space that's too small or too big to have the conversation. But when you buy the book, be sure to read the afterward. There's a really interesting little golden nugget about Jeopardy and Condoleezza Rice. So be sure to read it. And Laura Coates.
Yes.
That's a whole other conversation. Yes. So yeah, read the afterward. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Canon and Condoleezza
Right.
Rice.
But one other thing I do want to say real quick, because I do training with police officers on implicit bias. We're not going to have that conversation because I don't want to get my blood pressure up. But one of the things that I've talked about with police officers, when someone says something that's racist, sexist, homophobic, or xenophobic, I think one of the easiest things you can do in a very benign kind of way is say, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
So when someone asks you, why are you single? Ask them, what do you mean by that?
Mhm.
Their first response is gonna be like, oh, you know. Their second response is probably gonna start to stutter and stammer. And their third response is probably gonna say just, oh, never mind, forget it. But I think it's important for us to push back in a very benign kind of way. What do you mean by that? You've discounted everything else that I have accomplished in my life. And as long as I don't have an MRS degree, that there's a deficit. So I think the easy way for you to respond, first respond, they go pick up Love Jones Cohort from Dr. Marsh's website. And then after that, say, what do you mean by that? Yes. But then after that, say, when they ask you, why are you single? Why aren't you married? Ask them, what do you mean by that? And keep asking until they understand the error in their ways.
Yeah,
Nice.
I love that.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great nugget.
Yes.
And it's in the book.
But no.
I like it. I'm gonna use it. I will use that. So definitely we want to thank everyone for joining. It's been a pleasure and hopefully you found this to be a treat.
Yeah.
It was very good to be in person.
Yes.
Her energy is infectious. Kris and I already are wired, but to have Dr. Marsh in the flesh is just the three of us. I don't know what's going on after. Drinks, what?
In our introduction Zoom that we had, Diane only gave us like 30 minutes, so like we went over. Got the Zoom off on us, like what?
Dude, they kind of was like, and then
Oh,
Right.
Well, they teased me the whole time after you got off, right? Yeah,
Oh.
I volunteered to be a cohort, travel partner.
yeah, he was like, I'll book my flight to South Africa just
Yeah.
in case you need somebody, which I was saying, Coach Kev,
Right.
and all of y'all who've been to our other,
Coach
the
Kev
coach and
travels.
the therapist.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
We can put this show on
Coach
the.
Kev also works on shifting his Sala, you see what I'm saying? In his current Sala position. So,
Right.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you guys for joining the coach and the therapist in conversation. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. We'll have, I don't know what the topic
Absolutely.
is. We're gonna figure out something.
Actually, you guys, if you want to, we love hearing from y'all about just things you would be interested in talking about. So you can always reach out to Kev, from casual to serious. Am I
That's correct. Yes, from casual to serious, right? That
Yeah.
is the,
Everything for Kev is from casual to serious.
right.
Almost everything for me is Kris Violet, that's my name, or Space for Healing. But please DM us, hit us up about different topics you guys would like to talk about, because we appreciate you being here. We know time is valuable, and we also know everybody is Zoom burnt. Yeah, so we are absolutely thrilled.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was fantastic.